A leader's job is to awaken that dormant talent, awaken the potential that's within them and put it to use. Now, like the people who fall asleep on the bus and they wake up at the last stop and they go, oh, wait, this isn't where I'm supposed to be. This isn't where I want to be. Yeah, sometimes those sleepers, when we wake them up, are going to decide that this isn't where they want to be. And they leave. It's got to happen. But other times when leaders wake up these sleepers and connect them with a purpose, show them the impact that the work they do and that their organization does is having on the world, they turn into a keeper, which is the ideal employee. That's someone who's there not just for a paycheck or to build career capital. They're there because it's where they want to be, doing what they want to be doing it with the people they want to do it with.
Hey, it's Rocky. Welcome to Richer Soul. Today's guest is Gregory Offner, who will share how not to make work suck. Imagine it's 12 months from now, and you've achieved your major life goals. How does it feel to be in the best shape of your life? To wake up energized, excited about the day? To have great relationships and friends who support you and propel you forward? How does it feel to have an excess of money, to be able to make the choices you want? To be fearless and open to trying new adventures? Imagine being connected to the universe and it providing everything you desire. It's possible over time, and your past does not dictate your future. The only thing holding you back from this vision is you. It's time to take control of our thoughts and use them to our advantage. Welcome to Richer Soul, where we achieve our dreams and create harmony to health, wealth, relationships, time, and spirituality. If you have not had a chance to listen to episodes 1 through 9, I encourage you to go back and listen to the framework behind Richer Soul and how to create the life of your dreams. You can also find all the show notes for this episode at richersoul.com. Today's quote is from John Gardner. Did you collaborate in your own defeat? A lot of people do learn not to. That's kind of funny. I find many people create their own defeat, especially in what they do for work. We make choices at such a young age, and if we don't question them, we may end up in a place that we don't enjoy. And that's what we're going to chat about today. Before we continue, let's review last week's action step, which was to take a look at something in your financial life that you don't understand and go learn about it. Money isn't that hard, but we get emotional over it. Or we think maybe math is hard. Neither is true. And remember, let's not collaborate with our financial defeat. Take a step and learn a little bit more about it. Speaking about money, we are in different times. The word inflation's back, and it's been a lifetime since people have had to deal with this. It changes markets and returns, and it eats away at your purchasing power. One issue is financial repression, which is what I think is currently happening. Think about it this way. You get a raise where your money grows at 6%, but then prices go up 8%. While you look and see you have more money, the reality is it's actually worth less. And this happens very subtly, and we don't notice it. And it tricks our minds because we think we have more, but we actually don't because it's worth less. And this compounds over times, and the dollars get very large. Everyone seems to be talking about a recession, and the reality is we do have business cycles. They tend to last 7 years, but the current one seems to have been going on for more than 14 years without much of a dip. This is why we have so much money floating around and prices getting out of control. At some point, it has to come back to normal. I suggest you just keep an eye out and see what's going on and make wise decisions about picking your assets and where you're investing. It comes back to learning how money works. And there's tons of great resources out there, and we've shared a lot in the past. Today, we're going to chat about how you make money and how to live our ultimate lives. Do you love what you do? If not, why do you keep doing it? Listen in today as we cover this topic. There are many forces out there that make it hard to bring about the change we want, and we need to be aware of them so we can appropriately navigate. Too often we learn the lessons too late in life. Today, we want you to learn what we've learned. Gregory Offner is one of the most in-demand experts on the topic of professional performance and navigating disruption. His clients include Fortune 100 companies, and he's often asked to keynote at conferences where industry leaders and executives turn to him for a new perspective on how to elevate performance, eliminate disengagement, and make work suck less. Let's meet Greg. Welcome to Richer Soul, Greg Offner. It's great to have you join us today.
Glad to be here, Rocky. Thanks for having me.
And I'm excited to learn from you today. We always like to start at the beginning. What was it like when you were growing up, and how much did your family and school teach you about money?
Well, I grew up in a fairly normal middle class household. My mom was a teacher. My dad worked in construction. And I didn't feel much different from the kids I went to school with. But as an adult, I look back and realize that my parents had put me in a fairly exclusive private school and taken out quite a lot of loans to make sure that I got in this echelon that I didn't know we didn't belong in. I just came home to my house and thought that's the way life was, and went to my friends' houses and thought that's the way life was. But now that I look back on kind of who they were, their parents were doctors and lawyers and attorneys, and mine were great people as well, but we were in different socioeconomic statuses. And so the way that I learned about money was, I think, different from the way that they learned about money. I was taught that money was something that you saved and you held on to, and that I would need it later in life. But as my dad would say, money was always burning a hole in my pocket. I'd get money and I'd run to spend it just as fast. And I think that the difference between maybe how some of my friends were taught about money was, yeah, spend that money, but it's not called spending, it's called investing. And you invest it in something that's going to make money.
Interesting. It's always interesting to hear those dichotomies of parents, kids, and being in different situations. And most kids, just whatever they're in is what's natural to them because they don't know any other world.
Mm-hmm.
So you never felt lacking then in that situation?
No.
Like everyone else had stuff, or...
It's funny you bring this up because we have an 18-month-old, and my wife Kim and I were talking about this. The only thing I never had was Power Wheels. Remember those like automated car that you could drive around? It was battery powered. You plugged it in. I never had that. I always wanted that, and my daughter's going to have one, damn it. But I never really felt like I was wanting for anything else. I mean, I played all the sports. We went on family vacations once a summer down the shore. It felt, for all intents and purposes, like every other kid growing up. And maybe it's because I grew up in the early 80s, when middle class was still relatively strong and prosperous. So it didn't feel that different from the kids that I was going to school with.
That was before we spoiled all our kids, right?
Before everybody got everything. No, I mean, my dad instilled in me a work ethic that if you want something, you have to work for it. But when you ask about learning about money, I don't know that I got a financial education the way that I'd like to give my kids a financial education.
Well, and schools don't teach money. College doesn't teach money. It isn't until you go out and figure it out yourself, unless you happen to be lucky that your parents taught you money. And in most cases,
and thank God. I mean, I thank God every day that I learned about photosynthesis and not how to manage money. It just, at every time I go to the ATM, it comes in handy when I think about photosynthesis. And so I'm being sarcastic, listeners. I'm being sarcastic.
I use the quadratic equation to figure out my password for the
Pythagorean
ATM.
theorem. Exactly.
It's funny how that is. I think little by little, I think we will see that change going forward. And I think a lot of parents, that's a door that COVID has opened. Parents see more visibility into the classroom, especially with everyone on Zoom. And they having to take more of a role, I think, has woken them up to the fact that they should have been in that role to begin with. Too often, they let that go to other people instead of taking responsibility.
It's always so hard to say what should school teach and what shouldn't school teach, because just by nature of it being, it meaning the education system, such a big behemoth, like a large corporation, it's hard to get it to change in real time. So in some ways, you're already behind. You know, once they've made an institutional decision to change this curricula or to adjust curricula a certain way, you're kind of behind the curve. But on the other, the internet and specifically YouTube has made education widely available to anyone who wants it. So I think just being prompted to pay attention to financial literacy is something that wasn't happening when I was a kid. I mean, when I was a kid, financial literacy meant that I had my savings passbook for my local bank and that I knew how to put an entry in there whenever I gave them my money. And then I was perplexed as to why they were closed at 3 p.m. and never open on the weekends. I felt like they could take my money, but I could never get it back. It was such a strange thing to me as a kid, the way banks worked.
Maybe schools could teach that work sucks, but we'll get to that in a little bit. So you get out of school. Did you have the idyllic life? Everything work out perfect?
Yeah, sunshine and cotton candy is the story of my life, let me tell you. No, Rocky, it was a challenge. But everybody, challenge is a very subjective word, right? My challenge is different than other people's challenge. Why was it challenging for me? It was challenging for me because I didn't really like what I was doing. I wanted to be a rock star. I was studying music education in college initially, and then decided I didn't want to be an educator, that whole arrangement wasn't for me. The bureaucracy was really starting to bubble in the classroom at that point, and teachers were being seen less as the authority figure and more as the problem. And when I saw that, I realized I wanted no part of that. But I didn't know what else I wanted to do with my life. And so I came out of school and fell into a job in sales, as I guess one does when your only talents are performing and entertaining on stage. And then, of course, my academic background, which at that point was sort of pivoted from music into philosophy and psychology. So in the sense that I was doing well financially, yeah, life was great. I was able to make a good living as a salesperson, sales manager, sales leader. I mean, I moved up and up through the ranks in corporate America for Fortune 100, 500 companies, small privately owned organizations. I got into insurance for a little while. So I found interesting things to do, but I never felt like I was doing anything fulfilling. I was just sort of passing the time and collecting as big a check as I could along the way. And I know that there's people who hear that story and go, oh, sounds like a great life. And I mean, yeah, having money helps. It's not a bad thing. But I'm a person that's always been driven by purpose. And I have to believe that I'm here to do something meaningful. Otherwise, what's the point? And so a lot of my internal struggle was reconciling the fact that I didn't find a lot of meaning in what I was doing during the day. But there were a lot of people who looked at what I was doing during the day and the type of life I was living and thought I had it made. I had it all figured out, that this guy must be loving every last bit of it. And I wasn't. It's kind of like The Walking Dead at work. Like I would show up, I would do as much as I had to make as much as I needed, and then I'd bounce. I'd leave. Now at night, that was a different story, because I had found a way to work myself into a piano bar. I worked at a piano bar in Philadelphia. I was the piano player. I was the entertainer. And that filled me spiritually, emotionally, from a fulfillment standpoint. That filled me in a way that my day job could never. Now, it didn't pay much. I mean, it barely paid anything. If that was my only job, I would have been eating ramen noodles 4 times a day. But I really liked what I was doing. And so I was caught in this existential struggle of loving the money and hating the work during the day, hating the money and loving the work at night, and had no idea, or at least didn't stop, didn't pause, didn't reflect long enough to see how to merge the two together.
And that's when life becomes fun and profitable.
Precisely. And life, in a way, gave me that opportunity. In 2015, again, I've got this day job, I've got this evening job. I'm leaving one of my gigs, one of my evening gigs, one of my musical gigs, to go to the next one. And my voice is feeling hoarse. It's just feeling kind of scratchy. And so I go to this gig and I start to sing. And this is what came out. This is what came out. It sounded like trash. It sounded worse than Joe Cocker on a bad day. And if you know who Joe Cocker is, listener, that's a really gravelly, raspy voice. And I was scared because I couldn't make the pitch I was trying to make. I couldn't sing in tune. Couldn't even sing. What had happened was my voice gave out after years of overuse, misuse, and abuse, never giving it rest between the day job and the night job. Add in some booze and cigarettes and yelling over loud bar noises, and you've got a recipe for vocal disaster. And when doctors looked at my vocal cords, they said, if you do nothing, you're going to lose the ability to speak forever in about 2 weeks. We recommend that you have surgery. It's going to be 6 to 8 months of recovery time. You won't be able to speak. You won't be able to conduct sales calls. But we think with the proper surgical intervention, we can at least restore your ability to have a conversation. We're not really sure where that's going to leave your singing voice. For me, receiving that news was similar to being told that you've got a couple weeks to live. For me, it was a death-like experience because my voice was me. It was how I identified with the world. It was how I made an impact. It was my competitive advantage. And in an instant, doctors said, that's it, it's gone. So now I had to reckon with the loss of this income source during the day and the loss of this personal fulfillment source at night. And it left me staring in the mirror, kind of wondering what the purpose for being here was, wondering whether I wanted to be here anymore. And that uncertainty lingered for several years through more surgeries, more vocal rehab. Ultimately, I've had 15 surgeries on my vocal cords. I've spent 6 years having them repaired and rebuilt, going through hundreds of hours of vocal therapy, spending months in silence while they healed after surgeries. And along the way, I had some great mentors and advisors who stepped into my life and helped me see where the skills I had employed and was developing during my day job could merge with the skills I had employed and were developing in my night job, where that could be brought to bear in a different way. And that led to the work I do now as a professional keynote speaker, a business consultant, and some people say I'm an expert on the topic of performance. It feels weird sort of throwing that title around, but I get the pleasure of speaking and working with organizations all over the world, helping them take the irk out of work, helping them make work suck less.
That's an amazing journey. Well, let me ask you, why does work suck so much?
Yeah, I get that question a lot, and it's fascinating because everybody's got their own spin on it. Some people say, work sucks because you're just working for the man. And other people say, hey, that's just work. You know, if work weren't work, what would it be? Work's got to be hard. That's what it is. Everybody's got their own perspective. But I think that work as a concept hasn't evolved with the world. Work as a concept is still stuck back in the 1900s. Business is phenomenal. There's no greater force for change or progress on the planet than business when it's conducted ethically and consciously. Business is amazing, but the institution of work, if we were in sociology class, we'd say the mores and folkways, sort of the traditions of work, they suck. They don't add value. They don't add value for virtually anyone, except for a select few. And we need to look no further than this conversation about returning to the office right now. The only people who are excited about returning to the office are the senior executives that entered into long-term leases at a discount several years ago, are the commercial real estate brokers that are trying to lease out spaces, and are the owners of the buildings that they work in. Nobody else is excited to go back to the office. It adds no value. We've been shown that it adds no value. Companies are more productive, more profitable throughout the pandemic than they were before it. Workers are happier because they don't have hour, 2 hour, 3 hour round trip commutes. So much like the idea of work, the institution of work is stuck in the past. We haven't created or embraced new rules for these new tools that we've been given. And because of that, work sucks. Like if I hired you to come build a house and I wouldn't let you use any power drills or power hammers, after about an hour, you'd say, Greg, this sucks. There's an easier way to do it. There's a better way to do it. We can take the friction out of the process. And so my aim is to help organizations take the friction out of the process and to empower their people to leverage some of the soft skills. I call them tactical skills because soft skills just sounds like, who cares about soft skills? Tactical skills. Everybody wants tactical skills. Yeah. So I empower their people to leverage these tactical skills so that they perform better, so that they see the impact of the work that they're doing, so that they connect their purpose with the organization's purpose.
So what are these tactical skills?
They're the 7 keys of success. There's 7 skills that I've identified. And in our research, we've shown that they are curiosity, drive, energy, focus, gratitude, attitude, and belief. So these 7 skills underlay the way people perform at and look at the work that they're doing. How do they show up? How do they perform? So take, for example, curiosity, the first key. When folks show up, before they even show up, they roll out of bed. They look out the window. They go, it's raining. It's going to be a crappy day. They've just set the tone for the rest of their day based on a decision they made on one factor. If they embraced a mindset of curiosity, they could look out the window and say, it's raining. I wonder how I could make today a great day. So rather than approaching a situation with certainty, saying, I know what's going to happen, I know what to expect, when we approach a situation with a curious mind, we create space for all sorts of other possibilities. Put it another way, when we're trying to problem solve, and I had this happen to me personally, a lot of businesses are under-resourced. We don't necessarily have the resources we need or we think we need to be successful, but the people need to perform anyway. So under-resourced businesses love the idea of embracing curiosity, because instead of looking at a situation and saying, this isn't going to work, we don't have XYZ tool that we need, folks who approach that situation with the mindset of curiosity go, all right, how could we make this work without XYZ tool? What are some alternatives we could choose? It's that asking the what if.
When I heard you talk about those 7 factors, what popped into my mind is this something we can train people, or do you have to find people who have these and then give them the ability to use them and to work with them? Because a lot of what we talk about is hiring to mission, values, purpose. And I can train people, but I can't give them I can't train them on values. Either they have the same values that we do or they don't. And so can you train curiosity, or do you want to hire people who are curious?
The answer is yes. But let's back up. So where do values come from?
All of this is programming from our childhood.
Okay. So values come from a belief system, right? We may get that from our childhood. There are 2 ways that we learn. We teach ourselves or we're taught by others. So you can point to the Frederick Douglasses and the Abraham Lincolns of the world that were, self-taught. They were illiterate and taught themselves to read. But then others of us, we have the luxury of going to a school, and we're surrounded by students and teachers that all help us read. So by bringing someone who is curious into an environment that fosters curiosity, you're going to get a knock-on effect. You're going to get, you talk about finance, so you're going to get a compound interest effect of that value. But when you bring someone who hasn't fully developed their skill, their key of curiosity, into an organization that fosters it, you see it blossom. There aren't people that are curious or not curious. There are simply people who haven't fully developed their curiosity. I think that the limitations we put on ourselves are part of the problem. These stories that we've created for ourselves about what we can and can't do. For example, there are people in organizations right now that are called disengaged employees. or actively disengaged employees. Saboteurs, they say. They're here to make it worse for everybody. And maybe that's the case. But I don't think so. I've run into three types of people in any business: keepers, leapers, and sleepers. Keepers, leapers, and sleepers. And when we talk about folks who are disengaged, we're talking about people that are asleep. They're dormant talent. That person is an underappreciated, underutilized asset. They are what innovation experts would call trapped value. A leader's job is to awaken that dormant talent, awaken the potential that's within them, and put it to use. Now, like the people who fall asleep on the bus and they wake up at the last stop and they go, oh, wait, this isn't where I'm supposed to be. This isn't where I wanted to be. Yeah, sometimes those sleepers, when we wake them up, are going to decide that this isn't where they want to be. And they leave. It's got to happen. But other times when leaders wake up these sleepers and connect them with a purpose, show them the impact that the work they do and that their organization does is having on the world, they turn into a keeper, which is the ideal employee. That's someone who's there not just for a paycheck or to build career capital. They're there because it's where they want to be, doing what they want to be doing it with the people they want to do it with.
Work becomes fun.
Work becomes fun.
So one of the things that I've heard you talk about, and I think this is sometimes probably where companies get it wrong, they're not teaching people to be better people and more curious. They're just trying to up their skills in their particular role.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we fix that?
We spend $300 billion globally on training and development. And when you break down where that spend goes, 98% of it is on job-specific training, developing an employee. And yes, there needs to be job development. There needs to be job-specific development. Employees need training in the roles that they're doing. But if we redirected just a portion of that to developing the person, not just the employee. So let's say Bob is an accountant and we develop Bob as an accountant, which means he gets better at Excel spreadsheets and understands generally accepted accounting principles and GAAP regulations and things like that. That's great. But that's with the assumption that Bob cares about being an accountant. What if Bob just fell into that role 15 years ago and hasn't been able to get out? Oh my God, he's beating his head against the wall in the cover of darkness every night because he hates being an accountant, but it pays too well. And his family needs the money. And life is hard and it moves quickly. And he hadn't had time to breathe since he graduated college. And I know there's a lot of people out there that go through that experience. I went through that experience. When we develop Bob as a person, when we develop curiosity, we develop drive, focus, gratitude, all these skills, these keys that I talked about earlier. And there's more. These are just the 7 predominant ones, but there are more. When we develop those skills, Bob gets closer to what's up at the top of Maslow's hierarchy, this concept of self-actualization. Bob gets closer to becoming all that Bob is capable of being. And this is important, and we can go back and look at an advertising campaign that the Army had. Back in the 80s, the Army slogan was "Be all you can be." It wasn't Army strong. It wasn't Army of one. It wasn't warrior tough. It was "Be all you can be." That spoke to people. That was the most successful advertising slogan they've had in their history. It's also the longest running slogan they've had in their history. And most generals who are running the recruiting branch of the military today have said on record they wish it was still their slogan because it spoke to people. Because when you become all that you can be, that carries over into the work you do as a soldier. When Bob is fully Bob, when he's all the Bob that he can be, that doesn't just benefit him as an accountant, that benefits him as a father, as a community member, as a partner. So if organizations harnessed just a fraction of the time they have to train their people and developed the person, in addition to developing the employee, The knock-on effect would be a better person steps into that role of an employee each day. A better person goes home, spends time in their community, and extends the broader impact. So organizations that are focused on ESG or CSR, like corporate social responsibility, environmental social good, this is ticking those boxes. This is growing the business by growing the people within it.
Why don't most companies do this?
So I have a theory, and the theory is that it's not sexy. It's very sexy to be able to point to a line item on a spreadsheet and show an immediate ROI. Hey, Bob, we had sales training last week. Remember, Bob's the accountant. Bob, we had sales training last week. And look, the next quarter, our profits are up. It's working. This is great. Developing tactical skills not only takes time to evaluate when it comes to ROI, but it's also going to create some new events that'll take place in an organization. For example, I talked about keepers, leapers, and sleepers. That middle group, leapers, they're the people who are trying to develop career capital because where they are isn't exactly where they want to be or where they want to end up. They may be at a small organization trying to build the skill set to jump to a larger organization, right? They're at a small mom and pop pharma company and they want to go work for a large pharmaceutical company in the future. Or maybe they're at a large pharma company right now and they know that they're just a senior manager, but if they went to a smaller startup, maybe they could be the chief medical officer, or maybe they could be a senior vice president. Wherever they are, they're trying to build up some sort of career capital to get where they want to go. When we start developing tactical skills, soft skills within our people, some of them now have the skills to leave. Bob may not want to be an accountant anymore. And now we've developed the skill of curiosity, reframing, perspective shifting, gratitude. And Bob realizes now a path to be where he wants to be. Bob is now a leaper. And it's hard. It's very hard for a CFO to wrap their head around why we're going to invest money into skills that may cause someone to leave. But I've asked them to look at this from a different lens because the Bureau of Labor and Statistics shows that people are jumping ship every 3 to 4 years right now. Some would say it's actually less time. Some of my clients are saying they're seeing it as low as 2 years now. But these people are leaving. We know they're going to leave. We know they're going to leap. We don't necessarily know exactly why. There's lots of factors, but they're going to. So the question I ask is, when they leave, what will they say about their time here? What if we helped them get where they wanted to go? What if these people became brand ambassadors? What if when they went to their next job, they were singing the praises of this organization, how we developed them as a person, how we helped them achieve their goals? Of course, they've got to show up and create an impact for the business during the day. Of course, goes without saying. That's why you're here. This isn't school, right? We're not just bringing you in to develop you, and it's not altruism. But what if we saw a bigger purpose of letting them leap? Because when they go to their next place of employment and they're sitting at lunch with their new colleagues, some of whom are ready to make their leap, and they're talking about how great this organization was, how amazing it was to work here, how we prepared them, and all of a sudden these colleagues are going, hey, what was the name of that HR person you said worked at your old company? They can become one of your greatest sources of new talent development out on the street. And if that weren't good enough, there's more. A lot of these workers are boomeranging back after a year or two. They're leaping and then realizing they actually had it better where they were. So you've allowed them to leap. You've allowed them to gain new career capital that you're not paying for. You've allowed them to gain perspective and outside experience, make connections, second and third order connections with potential suppliers, customers, etc. They come back and they bring experience. They bring perspective. They bring value. So to me, it's not as short-sighted as show me the ROI for this development. To me, this is a long-term play. This is a philosophy that works for a business who's in it for the long haul, who's not managing quarterly share price to quarterly share price, who's looking at 20 years down the road, what have we built? And unfortunately, my experience is that a lot of particularly publicly held companies right now are managing for the share price. It is very short-sighted leadership.
Today's episode is sponsored by Profit Answer Man Podcast. Did you know that most small business owners hate looking at their financials? It's one reason they may struggle with business success. The Profit Answer Man podcast helps them ensure they are profitable and can pay their employees and weather the storms we all have to face. It's built on the Profit First methodology of pay yourself first. The Profit Answer Man podcast is a must-listen to for every small business owner and anyone who wants to help them survive and thrive. Check it out on your favorite listening platform. It's true, and it has to do with how boards are created and how CEOs are hired, how they're compensated, and the culture that they come in with. Now, many people don't realize how often these CEOs turn over in companies. And that's part of it. If you're just here to maximize your current shareholder value or your personal value until you hop to the next company, then that's kind of what happens. And that's the dirty little secret. And I think that's why people are upset at what top leaders make, because the reality is many of them don't provide much value. Mm-hmm. Above and beyond. And so that has been quite questioned. As for why people jump, I'll be honest, I tell people to jump. And the reason I tell people to jump is companies have these silly rules on pay raises, and they stick you into bands and they stick you into percentages. Whereas if you're somebody and you make 3 or 4 hops, your income differential between you and the person who stayed in the company is dramatic. And if the companies can't figure out how to compensate and how to do that appropriately, unfortunately, job hopping is a great way to make your income go up a lot. It compounds much, much quicker. And so that's just the reality of the situation. If you look at the rewards and what they do, you will see why people behave the way that they do. They are rewarded for that. So again, if you made CEOs pay based on where the company was 20 years from now, you'd see a different behavior. And unfortunately, from what I understand, in the next 10 to 20 years, half the companies in the S&P 500 won't be there.
Oh, yeah. So
we're going to see disruption massively.
I mean, that is if you look back in history, that's exactly what it is. Is that those organizations change frequently. Yeah, you talk about board composition, you talk about CEO pay. If I could wave a magic wand, I would tie the pay increase of the top employee to the bottom employee. So if the top employee at an organization, it may not be the CEO. In some cases, your top sales performers are making more than senior executives with their comps and bonuses. So taking out direct compensation, which is to say I sold $1 million and so I make 25% of that or whatever, right? I'm talking about like performance pay. Like, yeah, we love what you did, so here's a 50% bonus. I'm talking about take any direct sales commission out of it. Look at the executive or senior level pay. What does it go up? 25%? Great. Secretary's pay goes up 25% next year. I think very quickly you'll see some of this ridiculous pay package vacillation from year to year change.
I have not done the studies, so I'm just speaking from the gut here. I'm wondering how much of executive compensation is tied to stock awards and stock price.
Stock awards, yeah,
yes,
a significant chunk.
The actual base pay they earn.
A significant chunk. So you have to look at total comp. I mean, it's not just salary, it's total comp. How much is their total comp increased? So because you get to a point where it's just obscene, you can't just well, here's $50 million. Not all organizations are doing that, right? So you have a couple $1 million plus, $10, $20 million in stock options or whatever, whatever the number turns out to be. But we tend to focus on these outlier CEOs and realize that there are lots of companies squished in the middle where the CEO or the owner, right, is taking these 10, 20, 30% increases year over year as the company's more profitable and the employees are dripping along at 2 and 3%. And can they do it? Sure. Should they do it? I don't think so. Will they continue to do it in the future? I think the market's going to tell, because now organizations are hard pressed to justify their existence. And here's what I mean by that. The old way of work was you needed a job for an income. The future of work is that if I'm entertaining enough, I can go on YouTube and make $10 million next year. I mean, that's an outlier also, but real talk, the average person could figure out a way to make $50,000 between YouTube, TikTok, Etsy. It's doable. So what's your value proposition as an employer? Really, what is the value?
And that is shifting. And we are seeing, even within companies, a lot more of people being, in a sense, fractional workers. You're hiring a consultant, or you're bringing in a temp, or you're bringing in somebody to handle a specific piece of the work instead of hiring somebody permanently on staff. And if you think about the way the world used to be, everyone was kind of selling their own services back in the day. Then we all got put together into the factory system where we're all working together, getting a small cut, and it took the risk away. And at that time, they did see good salary increases. But now I think we're going back to gig work and to the economy where people can do their own thing, figure out their own value, and not give it all to the company.
So my battery pack cut out about halfway through whatever you were just saying, and I missed the beginning of it.
Okay.
And there are good parts of the gig economy, but there are bad parts of the gig economy. So I'm not a huge gig economy supporter. I think it is a necessary disruption that's going to hold traditional work accountable for its shortcomings and hopefully inspire some real meaningful change. But there's some really nasty parts of the gig economy. The lack of workers' compensation protection for injuries on the job. I mean, we could go on and on about the negative, but what's fascinating is what's fascinating is the good. And this fascinated me when I learned it. The word gig is actually a shortened word. It's an abbreviation for a word. I didn't know this. As a musician, I've had thousands of gigs and I never thought about what the word meant. But the word gig started to be used in the 1920s by jazz musicians. If a jazz musician had a performance somewhere, they'd say, I got a gig in Chicago, or I got a gig here. Prior to that, they'd call it an engagement. So the gig economy is literally the engagement economy. And if you look at how those workers operate, gig workers are highly engaged. They're eager to get to work. If they're not, somebody else is going to take that fare. They're going to take that delivery. They're going to take that job. They're effective and they're efficient because their profit margins and future work is at stake. So what if we brought those aspects of the gig economy into traditional work? How do we do that? Well, we do that by creating a mechanism whereby people understand the purpose of being present. What is the impact of my work? See, we were talking about CEO pay and how it's tied to stock. And in a way, a CEO can point to a stock price and go, well, see, I'm valuable. But I've had several clients who are CEOs that during the pandemic said, when I'm not going in and out of meetings, I realize I don't actually do a whole lot. And it fascinates me because while I'm not taking away from the impact CEOs have, they are the visionaries. Hang on one second. CEOs certainly have an impact. They're the visionaries. They've got to set the direction for the organization. They've got to inspire the people within that organization. They've got to communicate with shareholders. There's a lot that CEOs have on their shoulders. But when it comes to actual work, if CEOs disappeared for a week, would we notice? It's a different conversation if you ask the bus drivers in your city. If all the bus drivers in your city disappeared for a week, would you notice? So did they really do as much as they're paid for? Is the stock price really a fair metric of their impact on an organization? I don't know. I'm not saying that I have all the answers, but I think that the pandemic has provided the opportunity to start asking these questions. And the gig economy and technology has provided new tools for which I think there need to be new rules when it comes to work. So what if we created a way to measure the impact of every employee such that they knew when they were done working? So if I'm a secretary, how do I know when I'm done for the day? Well, the clock says 5 p.m. That's how you know you're done. So what's my motivation to work any faster, to be more efficient, or to innovate? I mean, I told you my father was in construction. The first guy on it, the first day a guy walks onto the job site, he learns what is the speed this crew works at. You're the fastest drywaller? Shut up. Slow down, because we don't work that fast. Because what's the incentive? It's going to be here again tomorrow morning. What if we took a different approach? Again, this is a part of the gig economy that I think we need to adopt. I know when I'm done. If I'm driving Uber and you drop someone off, that's you're done. And if you've made enough money for the day that you're satisfied with that income, you're done. What if at work there were ways for the average secretary, accountant, office manager, there were more that they could do to earn more? Or this is what we need you to do for the day, and when you're done, goodbye. It's 1 p.m. Great. You finished. See you tomorrow. And I understand that from a leader's standpoint, this creates certain staffing and employee inventory, let's call that employee inventory issues. But you talked earlier about risk and reward. Like, if I'm the employee, your staffing problem isn't my problem. That's your problem. There needs to be a better way to incentivize employees to innovate and perform. Because again, this old way of saying work starts at 9, ends at 5, whistle blows, goodbye, like that doesn't work in an era where Wi-Fi is ubiquitous, when streams of income can come from all sorts of places. Work must catch up, or traditional work must catch up, or it's going to die.
It's funny because we've had people on with the opposite kind of issue almost. And most of these guys are in tech, gals, and they find that their work gets done super quick. And they're told, well, you just have to sit there. You can't turn it in early. And so they're forced to go through it. And I guess it's the same concept in a slightly different way. Everybody's throttling everybody instead of opening up the throttles and letting businesses take off. And I think people are worried, if that happens, will they still pay me the same amount? Will I still have a job? Or will I be let go? And I think that's the fear that comes from that.
The fear that, how do you mean? I'm not sure I understand.
If I can get my work done in an hour and a half, right, is the company going to go, well, why do we really need this person? Why can't somebody else just take over their time? Because they're only giving us so many hours of work. They don't look at it and go, hey, this person's actually defined things well, figured out systems, was curious about things, and has got this process running so efficiently that they are able to do this.
Yeah, I think part of that is going to be a leadership challenge. It's going to be the new challenge of leadership in the future, is figuring out the rules for this new world of work. But simply pushing it to the side and going, well, I'm scared that this might happen, like that ain't gonna fly anymore. And as soon as, especially in the United States, as soon as we figure out how to decouple healthcare from full-time employment, it's game over. It's game over for all these employers who say, oh, I got the best healthcare plans. Like that's going to go away. What do you really provide? I think one thing that we're not looking at is this $300 billion global spend on training and development. If you're a large organization, you can provide personal and professional development opportunities that the average person would never be able to access on their own.
So this is an area I struggle with. And I struggle with this because I've been in rooms and events where people have paid a lot of money to have their employees be there. And yet it doesn't bring about the change. It doesn't. The people don't want to improve themselves. And I don't know what causes that, or if it's part of a bigger problem. But even when people are given the opportunity, I've seen people don't lean into it, and I'm not sure why.
I don't have all the answers, but I will tell you it starts with identifying whether that person is a sleeper, whether they're a leaper, or whether they're a keeper.
So do we know the percentages? How many are sleepers, keepers, and leapers?
It's going to change per company, but it's roughly 10 to 15% of an organization are your keepers. 70% are your leapers or undecideds, and a smaller percentage at the bottom are, so what's that, like 10, 15% are your sleepers. So it kind of follows standard deviation.
which means 85% of the people aren't in the right place or showing up.
Well, and this is the thing to understand about leapers is that a lot of the times they're A players.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times they're your A players, but and some leapers turn into keepers. Some leapers learn, they're engaged by a leader. They see a connection to an impact that they thought they'd have to go somewhere else to make. By being fully developed as a person, they become keepers. But in many cases, our workplaces are transitory. I mean, that's what creates culture. That's what creates innovation. Show me a workplace where the average tenure of an employee is over 15 years, and I'll show you an organization that's having trouble. That's having trouble innovating. That's having trouble getting creative. It's stagnation. We need new ideas.
There's all these different puzzle pieces, and too often we try and fix one thing and we end up with an unintended consequence in another place. And you talked about healthcare. The whole reason company healthcare came along was back in the last depression, they had price or wage controls in place. And so the way they got around wage controls was to offer more benefits because that's what they were allowed to do. So they broke through the system. And then that turns into the thing that holds everybody back in the future, unfortunately.
Well, and so today, I mean, I can share this personally. I used to work in health insurance. So I understand the system. I understand the game. And I need to have a CT scan done. I keep getting all these medical issues and I want to have a CT scan of my sinuses. So I called the facility and I said, I want to know how much this costs because a CT scan, any type of scanning, it's not qualitative. It's simply procedural. It doesn't matter who does it. You know, Uncle Barney in a friggin' panel van can do it if he has the machine. It doesn't matter where you go. You just got to get it done. So I know that there's a range and I ask for the price. And of course, the people who schedule you can't give you the price. You got to call another number. So I called the other number and I get a woman who says, happy to, got to talk to my supervisor. Goes, gets her supervisor 5 minutes later back on the phone. Our cost is $111.94. That blew my mind because the ranges are anywhere from $600 to a couple $1,000s for this procedure. So I said, wow, it's fascinating. So if I'm covering everything out of pocket and my insurance isn't, providing any sort of co-insurance or anything like that, if I'm covering this all, I'm going to be billed $111.94. She said, well, Sarah, you need to call your insurance to see what they're going to bill you. And I said, no, I just want to be clear. You're going to bill my insurance carrier $111.94, and then they're going to send me that bill because I pay it all out of pocket. That right? She said, no, sir, that's what the insurance company is going to pay us. I said, great. What are you going to bill my insurance carrier? And she says, oh, well, I don't know, sir. I said, I'm pretty sure you can find out. Maybe you need to talk to your supervisor. So she goes, okay, comes back 5 minutes later. And if you could hear the tone in this woman's voice, it was dejected, like she was disappointed. And she said, it's going to be $2,197. That's what we're going to bill you. I said, so if I were an idiot and didn't understand what was really happening here, I would have hung up the phone thinking that I was only going to owe $111 for this procedure. But in fact, you're only going to get $111 from my insurance carrier because of the discount you've negotiated, which means I'm going to get stuck with a $2,000 bill. And the average person doesn't understand that the cost of that procedure, that $2,000, is $2,000 because the insurance carrier will only pay $100 for every $2,000 that they're billed. It's a percentage game. And so the whole reason that healthcare is out of whack is because the misaligned incentives. And the whole reason that we're having this conversation about work sucking and a new way to manage employee value is because of misaligned incentives. If we applied that whole innovation expedition of work to road work, and let's say we had road crews incentivized to finish projects because they were paid per project. So redoing 95 from where it starts in Philadelphia down to the sports complex to the Northeast, right? It's a big stretch of highway, 95. Let's say that they estimate that's going to take 5 years. And the employees on that, I don't know, they make $50,000 a year. So that's worth $250,000 to each person that gets hired for that job. Here's the deal. You finish that project in 3 years, you still get $250,000. It takes 6 years, you only get 250 grand. 10 years, only get 250 grand. Now, some people would say, well, we're going to have massive safety compromises and people are going to cut corners. But then we incentivize the inspectors, the foremen, and the supervisors. We pay them hourly. If it takes them 10 years, great. That's 10 years of hourly pay. I don't care. But my job is safety, quality control. Now we don't have competing interests. We have cooperating interests. I want it done quickly. You want it done safely. Let's find a way to work together. We don't have that in corporate America. We've got, I'm at the top and I want as much money as I can. I'm at the bottom. I want to do as little as I can for as little as you're going to pay me, because that's how it works. And that's a problem. Incentives are misaligned.
I totally agree with you. And I was in the healthcare side, so I know how the insurance billing works and what an absolute mess it is. I think I had a test recently. I talked the company directly because I'm like, hey, what is this going to cost? They gave me a price. I said, that's the maximum you're going to charge me. They said, yes. They billed my insurance company, which same thing. The negotiated price with the insurance company was more. But because they said, hey, this is what we're billing you, that's what they billed me. And I didn't have to pay all the other ridiculous amounts that were above and beyond that. And I don't think people realize that. When you go for prescriptions, if you walk in the pharmacy and say, hey, what's the cash price? It could be considerably lower than what your insurance price is. Mm-hmm. And there are only two industries that I know of that have this absolutely screwed up system. One is healthcare. The other is college. And if you look at the inflation rates in college and healthcare compared to the rest of the economy, they are astronomical. And it's because of this. And it's time that those incentives disappear and that you shouldn't even have to call. You should be able to go to a website and say, what's an MRI cost? Oh, this is how much it is here. And I don't think people realize if you called 5 different places, you would get 5 vastly different numbers for what that MRI costs. And if it's at this facility versus that facility, there is a dramatic difference, whether it's hospital-based or private practice-based. The whole thing is an absolute and utter disaster. And if you don't take responsibility, nobody else will. So that's up to them. We do have misaligned priorities. And so lots of problems to solve. Today, we'll ask one thing. What's an action step people can take in their lives to make an improvement?
Oh, God, we've covered so much. It feels so difficult to answer that question. But I'd say the first step, one step rather, not necessarily the first step, but one step is to create a new input. I think that we fall into this trap of doing the same thing over and over and over again because life is difficult, life is busy. But we don't get change unless we change what's coming in. People are listening to this podcast, it's because they want to change what's coming into their brain. But I'd say take it a step further. Pick one of these 7 keys of success and read a book. Take a course, watch a YouTube video that relates to it. And in fact, just to make it really simple for your audience, if they text the word keys, Keys, to 33777. So if you just take out your phone, open up the text messaging, text keys to 33777, I'm going to send them a PDF, a 1-page of these 7 keys of success so they know what they are, how they can impact their life, and then go find a book that's about it. And you don't have to buy my products. Go research whoever it is that you like or want to listen to on YouTube. Google it. I mean, there's so many resources out there, like we said earlier, for development. Nothing's going to change unless we change the inputs that we're taking in. And so again, back to that idea that we're taught by the people we're around or we teach ourselves. If you can't be around people that are giving you these new inputs, we have to take advantage and take the initiative, take the first step for ourselves. Otherwise, things aren't going to change.
And that's excellent advice. It's time to learn the secrets of life. What's your secret to living an abundant life?
It's such an interesting question because of the word abundant. I have to think it's gratitude. I really do. There's so much we have, and one only needs to travel outside of this country and see some of the other parts of the world to realize, even the least fortunate of us here in the States, how much we have. And so just taking a moment every day to be grateful, doing what an exercise that in positive psychology is called the 3 blessings, writing down 3 things that I'm grateful for each evening before bed, that truly helps.
And that seems to be the number one answer to this question. And I don't think people realize, for us, COVID's winding down, it's kind of ending, and yet you go to a place like China and they're on lockdown in certain parts. And a lot of the rest of the world has not had the ease of COVID and restrictions that we've been able to enjoy, let alone economic prosperity. What did you learn later in life that you wish you would have learned sooner?
The value of investing, compound interest. And I mean, even just there's nothing wrong with money burning a hole in your pocket so long as you're trying to invest it. And I just think that if I had learned about investing, and I think is it maybe Rich Dad, Poor Dad, where the comment is made about letting $1 make 10, that a person with a poverty mindset works for their money. A person with a wealth mindset puts their money to work for them. I wish I had learned that concept earlier in life.
Another thing they don't teach in school. If you were to give an 18-year-old one specific piece of wisdom, what would it be?
You're never going to make it. And when I say that, I mean, I thought at one point in life that when I had $5,000 in the bank, I'd have made it. And then I thought when I had a business card with a title of vice president that I'd make it. Or when I had a 6-figure income that I'd have made it. You don't make it. Nobody wakes up and goes, cool, I'm done, that's it. You just reset the goalposts. So find something you're passionate about and drive towards it. Because every achievement that you make, yes, it's a cause to celebrate, but it's not a finish line. It's just another level. So you're never going to make it, and that's okay.
I can't tell you how many times I moved the goalpost. It happens. And that was the whole purpose of the podcast, right? You got rich. Now what? Another journey. If people would like to learn more about you and your work, where is the best place for them to do that?
So I'm on all the socials. That's a great place to hang out. But I'd say just come to my website, gregoryoffner.com. Check me out. Drop me a line. I'd love to connect and hear your thoughts on the show or see how I can help you.
And we will put that in the show notes. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks. It's a pleasure, Rocky. Have a great day.
How are you with the 7 keys of success? Do you love the work you do? That's where we started. If not, then do something about it. Are you a keeper, a leaper, or a sleeper? Are you happy in the position you hold, or do you want to do something about it? Greg was forced by life and the medical issues he faced. Sometimes we need the push to leap. I know I do. I need lots of shoves. What do you need to take that next step? Speaking of steps, this week's action step was to create a new input from the 7 keys of success. If you need the list, you can text keys to 33777. Then go find a book or a video or another episode of this podcast to learn more and to improve. I'm a big fan of curiosity and constantly learning. Greg shared a book with me that I'm excited to dig into on marketing. It's called The Buying Brain by A.K. Pradeep. I love learning about why people behave the way they do. It's just so interesting. If you enjoyed this episode, would you mind sharing it? I'd appreciate that. Thank you. Next week, we've got Jason Scott on to talk about it's never just business. It's about people. Thanks for listening. Have an abundant week.